mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
My name is John Gordon. I'll be your host.
And I'm your host, Katie Burke.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. We bring the resource to you, the DU Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm your host, Mike Brazier. Today we have an episode that has a little special meaning to me because I was able to participate in the story in which it's about, at least partially. And it relates to introducing new people to hunting. A lot of times when we think about introducing new hunters, we're thinking about younger people, our kids, our nieces, our nephews, or the neighbor's friends, or folks that are in that younger age class. But that's not always the case. A lot of times we have opportunities to welcome and introduce people that are young adults or that are even in their adulthood into various types of hunting. That's what we'll be talking about today, and there's a unique spin on this particular introduction, and you'll just have to stay tuned to hear about this detail. Joining me for this episode, I'm delighted to welcome in Dr. Kevin Ringelman, the H. Dale Hall Ducks Unlimited Professor of Wetlands and Waterfowl Conservation and Associate Professor down at LSU. Kevin, welcome back.
Good to be here, Mike.
And also is Patty Rodrigues, a PhD candidate from LSU. Patty, it's great to have you on here with us.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
So yeah, Kevin, we've had you on before. There was, I think, episodes 153 and 154 way a long time ago talking about talking about the same thing that we'll be touching on here today. So I'll ask you to introduce yourself, but for the sake of time, do so briefly. I'll encourage folks to go back and listen to those other two episodes to get the full recount of who you are. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Kevin Ringelman. I teach wetlands and waterfowl here at LSU. I've been here for about 8 years, and what we're going to be talking about today is one of my sort of supplemental duties, which is mentoring the LSU First Hunt program.
Thank you, Kevin. And Patty, introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us where you're from and what you're doing now.
So my name's Patty. I am a PhD candidate now at Louisiana State University in Dr. Phil Stouffer's lab. I grew up in Florida, but now I am studying Afrotropical forest birds in Equatorial Guinea.
Yeah, so not ducks, right? That's another sort of unique aspect of this. We're talking to you, and we're not going to be talking about your research so much, but you are certainly, I think, a self-professed bird nerd, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes, that is true.
I
can verify that.
I think I even saw that tattooed on your fingers, right?
Yes, I just recently got bird nerd tattooed on my knuckles, so for life.
You and I were in the hunting blind together, and I looked over and I could see, I forget which hand it was on, but I think whichever hand, it was the one that had nerd written out. And I'm thinking to myself, I hope the other hand reads bird. And sure enough, it did. So welcome to the club.
Thank you. I'm glad to be part of the club now.
Yeah. So you said you grew up in Florida, and this conversation here is about introducing people to hunting. You grew up in Florida. Did you have any prior exposure to hunting of any sorts?
No, actually, I didn't. So my family, my parents are both Brazilian, so I'm a first-generation American, and that's something that my parents never participated in. My dad likes to tell a story of when he was younger. His uncle took him hunting when he was little, and he said that he cried the whole way after. So he never was into hunting, and neither was my mom. And growing up in Florida, I went to University of Florida. That's where I did my undergrad. So I definitely have been exposed to people who are hunters, but I just never really wanted to be involved, in all honesty, growing up when I was younger. So yeah, not something I ever participated in. And
so then what was it that brought you where does your interest in bird conservation come from? We'll talk about kind of why you wanted to take the course that Kevin is offering a little bit later on, but I'm kind of curious about your interest in birds and bird conservation, where that comes from.
Honestly, when I was in undergrad, I didn't get into birds until relatively later in life. I think it was my last year, my senior year as an undergrad, we did an avian field techniques class. And we got to do some mist netting, and I got to extract a bird and hold a bird for the first time in my life. And I was just like, wow, I didn't know that you could do this as a job. I want to do this forever. I just want to hold birds. So I think working with birds is kind of a unique experience where you actually do get to have hands-on experience with the organism that you're working with. And I think that's what attracts a lot of people to birds in general, that they're so ubiquitous and pretty much anyone can be interested in birds because they're everywhere. So that's kind of what got me started.
Yeah. And then how did you did you have an interest in working on birds kind of overseas in a foreign country, or is that just kind of happened to be the lab that you ended up in?
Yeah, so when I first got interested in birds, my first job out of college was working with small mammals, actually. So I didn't get to work with birds until my second year out of college. I worked with blue-winged and golden-winged warblers, and then I just happened to have an opportunity to go volunteer doing some bird banding in Peru. So that was kind of my first tropical experience. And, anyone who's been birding in the tropics, I feel like it's, no turning back from there. So after that, I just got really interested in tropical birds. And I had met some of Dr. Stouffer's previous students just from other jobs. And that's how I kind of found out about his lab. And then he had a fellowship offering that I applied for, and I was lucky enough to get. So that's kind of how I got involved in the tropical bird work.
That's cool. I appreciate you sharing that. And that's one of the things that I encourage people to do. Kevin, I'm sure you do as well. And Patty, I'm sure you will also, is to certainly advocate for folks to get out and experience different places and different things. And that helps you learn so much about what your interests are. And it helps you also network and learn what those career paths are. So yeah, volunteering or getting a paid technician position, whatever you can kind of to do there to find and expose yourself to different parts of this conservation community is always great. So appreciate that. Kevin, I will want to go to you now. We'll talk about the First Hunt program. That's going to be the main part of the discussion. We're going to use Patty's experience as a unique sort of vignette of that. But reintroduce us to what it is, how it came about, how it's implemented. Talk about that program a bit.
Sure, happy to. So the program that we have here at LSU originated in 2008. So before I got here with Dr. Frank Rower, who is now president of Delta Waterfowl, and Larry Reynolds, who was the state wildlife biologist. You've had him on this podcast before. And together, they sort of saw a need for this sort of experiential learning because we were graduating students in the wildlife major who had never experienced hunting before. And so as future wildlife management professionals, their education is incomplete. I mean, if they're going to be interacting with hunters, then they need to understand the worldview of that important stakeholder group. And so it very much arose as, introduce students to the experience as part of their education. If they go on to be, lifelong hunters, that's great. If they do it once, that's great too. So they started off hunting public land. And Mike, as you know, a lot of the public areas in Louisiana are really difficult to access. And you kind of need to be a veteran hunter to have a really good hunt out there. And so fast forward a few years, we started partnering with private duck clubs who would offer some of their basically member days where only students would be allowed to hunt. And so we take advantage of their facilities, of their guides, of their boats, and things like that to really provide these students with a world-class hunting experience.
Kevin, that's really cool that you do that. Now, I will take a little bit of a sidetrack here and just say that was one of the first things that I told Patty whenever we were in the blind together that day. We saw the marsh come alive, the birds start moving around in such great number. I said, now, just want to be clear, not every morning that you duck hunt is going to be like this. It's kind of it's a good bad thing. You introduce someone and it doesn't necessarily have to happen on these clubs for this to be the case. But yeah, if your first hunt is one of such spectacular bird numbers and spectacular success, it's important to realize and manage expectations going forward that they're not all like that. But nevertheless, that's a valuable way and a valuable thing to expose first hunters to.
I think that's a really important point that you make, that, by seeing the quality of some of these places, it also speaks to the passion that those individuals have for managing the habitat and managing the resource, because it doesn't really matter how many ducks they're pulling out of there for harvest in a given season. They're providing habitat for way, way more than that. And so just demonstrating to students the passion that these hunters have for maintaining the resource, I think, is really important. And Mike, I think you wanted a little bit more about the course. So we run this student hunting course as an optional experience, and typically we target seniors in the wildlife techniques class because they've come up through our the rest of our curriculum learning about the value of hunters and sort of the North American model, but they don't have a visceral appreciation for any of that. And so this is sort of a capstone experiential learning opportunity that really encapsulates a lot of what our curriculum is about. And so in any given year, we put through probably 30 or 40 student hunters, which is the largest student hunting program anywhere in the country. So it's sort of a big logistical lift, but it's definitely worth it.
And you said you target students in the wildlife techniques class, but it's not exclusive to those students, is it?
No, that's correct. And Patty is a really good example. I mean, so she's a PhD student and is not taking senior level wildlife courses. But obviously, there's quite a bit of talk in the hallways when this hunting program is going on. And some of my graduate students have gone along as mentors and things like that. And so, it was immediately apparent that Patty had an interest in doing this.
That's pretty cool. And you also had, I think, if I remember correctly, a couple of folks. One was a chemistry major, or is it a physics major?
Yeah, this year we had a physics PhD student from Tulane and her sister, who is outside of the wildlife field as well here at LSU. And they found out about the program just by talking to students who were in the wildlife major and sort of contacting us professors. And we're happy to take anybody who's interested in hunting.
And you walk the students through the participants through hunter safety, gun safety, all of those crucial elements, right? What are the other kind of core components of the program before you get to those hunting experiences?
Well, so they've had all of their bird identification courses earlier in the curriculum, along with, wetland plants and wildlife habitat management. So they're really well grounded sort of academically for this experience. But from a practical perspective, yes. So I'm a certified hunter education instructor. We teach hunter safety in-house. And then, we complete that with shooting clays on the range. And then when we have time, we like to give the students more opportunity to handle firearms, like in a sporting clays course or something like that. We didn't quite get the scheduling right this year, so that piece fell through. But in previous years, we've been able to do that as well.
And you offer different types of hunts for the participants, for the students to go on, right? What we're going to talk about is a duck hunt, but that's not the only type of hunting that you offer people to the opportunity to, right?
Correct. So we typically field 2 or 3 early season teal hunts in late September. And then we will do some big duck hunts here when the students get back from winter break. And then Dr. Collier, who's sort of my partner in crime on this, who teaches the wildlife techniques course, he bosses a lot of the deer hunts that we do. So we do some deer hunts on private lands and things like that. And this year, there's some indication that we'll be expanding into some turkey hunts as well.
Oh, okay. So this continues into the spring, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So this will be the first time that we've spilled across both semesters. We usually try to get them all done in fall, but last year when we tried to do those big duck hunts in November, we just weren't holding a lot of birds on the properties that we had access to, and so pushing it to January, I think, will make a big difference.
Oh, I see. Okay. And you give the students an opportunity to indicate which of the hunts, which type of hunt they want to participate in, right?
There's a lot of moving parts on these things, as you might imagine, with students and their schedules and exams, and then our schedules and when we can access these clubs. But generally speaking, we try to prioritize people who have never hunted before. And yeah, they usually choose what they want to do. And as often as not, it's what fits with their schedule. But we offer more waterfowl hunts than deer hunts just because of, you can put 5 people in a duck blind, where deer hunting is sort of more of a one-on-one thing. So most of our students end up doing waterfowl hunts.
And Patty, that was that's the case with you. Did you indicate an early preference for wanting to go on a duck hunt?
I was only interested in doing the duck hunt. I don't think I'm ready to hunt anything outside of that.
Yet, I think it's really cool what you're doing, and there are a lot of other universities around the country that are doing similar things as part of this university hunt program. I think Delta Waterfowl is a big sponsor of some of this, and I know that's one of the things that they do, and they do a great job of it. And it's kind of fun to see the maturation of that program and how many people that it influences. And I know there are some other sponsors involved in your particular program. I'm going to give you an opportunity on the back end to kind of acknowledge all the people that are key players in this. But you and this program is one of many. But this was the first time that I have had the opportunity to participate as, I guess you would say, one of the mentors as part of the hunt that we went on. And that was a real special treat for me. I had been on youth hunts before where you're dealing with 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds, but to have the opportunity to serve as a mentor to someone who is into their adulthood, who is in the field or is going into a career in bird conservation or avian science, and especially a person who had never hunted before, like Patty, was really cool for me to be part of that. I think I got out of it as much as Patty did. It was really, really rewarding for me, and I appreciated the opportunity to be there. And it just so happened that I was going to be at the same location where the hunt was going to occur, and that was at Panola Conservancy in Shreveport, Louisiana. Paul Dixon, it's a big Ducks Unlimited supporter and volunteer. And Kevin, I know Paul has been very generous in his time and offering his property to your hunt program as well, right?
Yeah, we've done hunts there for 3 or 4 years now, and it's just an awesome experience. And he's been a big supporter of me in other ways as well. So we take our classes up there in the spring and band green-winged teal, and so we use his facilities for that too. And it's just he's a great guy.
The other thing that we had going there, and as part of this particular outing, was a filming of an episode for DU Nation. It's a new platform that Ducks Unlimited is rolling out as a way to provide additional content to our members and viewers. It's on YouTube. It's DU Nation. You can actually find it on the DU channel of YouTube. And the title of that episode is First Time Duck Hunt in Louisiana. So I encourage you to go find that episode, watch it, and you'll see in that episode some of the things that we'll talk about here. And so I think that's what we're about to do, is kind of get into the experience of the students, Patty in particular. But before we do that, we'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll hear all about Patty's amazing experience and have her tell the story through her eyes. So stay with us, folks. Welcome back, everyone. We're here resuming our conversation with Dr. Kevin Ringelman and Patty Rodrigues about LSU's First Hunt program, and this is where we move to Patty's experience. And at the outset, Patty, I described your situation perspective as being a bit unique. And to kind of lay that out a little bit more, I was surprised, I guess, if I'm being honest, when we were sitting around that first night before the hunt the next morning, and Paul Dixon and his staff there had prepared, I guess, roasted seemingly over an open fire, a suckling pig that had been raised on his property there. And I'm like, holy cow, what are we walking into here? And I think you sat down maybe a couple of seats down from me, and I heard you say, oh, this is the first time I've eaten meat in a long time. I forget how long you said, but that got me. I asked you a question, or somebody asked you a question. We learned that you're a vegetarian, but here you were eating pork, but you provided clarification on that and the circumstances or your perspective on vegetarianism. And so that's what I want to explore a little bit. How is it that a vegetarian such as yourself wanted to participate in this hunt program and wanted to go on a duck hunt? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, so obviously I'm not a super strict vegetarian. I think people are normally vegetarian for one of two reasons, or both. One is, animal rights and animal suffering, and the other is it's the impact of eating meat on the environment. And for me, it's the impact on the environment that is really the biggest driver behind me being a vegetarian. So in my mind, I don't see a problem with eating meat that is harvested or farm raised. Eating meat that I believe is sustainably raised or sustainably harvested. So yeah, I thought that going on the duck hunt would be a great way for me to eat some ducks. It kind of started off, like Kevin was saying earlier, it was immediately apparent that I was interested in going on this duck hunt because I was always like going through the leftovers of the ducks that the students would kind of like take the breast meat and leave like the hearts and the livers and stuff. And I was kind of like going through the trash at the end of the hunts and like picking some stuff off. So I've done that in the past as well. I worked in Ohio actually, and I stayed at this duck hunting club, and a lot of the members who would go on hunts would do the same thing where they would just take the breast meat or they would, leave some of the duck behind. So I've kind of had this habit over the past couple of years of like picking off duck leftovers. And so that was just like a natural transition for me of like, well, let me just eat a whole duck.
let me harvest the duck myself so I don't have to pick through the scraps, right?
Exactly.
So no, that's really cool. And so is this, a lot of times we think about people, adults getting into hunting for the first time for similar reasons. A lot of folks would have heard about sort of the locavore movement, people wanting to take more ownership of where their food comes from, a field-to-table movement. Is your perspective similar to that? Is it kind of fall into one of those, into one of those areas?
I guess partially, yeah. I think I really appreciate those types of movements. I wouldn't say that that's kind of my motivation behind going on the hunt. Honestly, from what I hear of what it's like to go on a hunt, whether it's like hunting duck or deer or turkey, for me, the most appealing thing was like the overall experience. Like the thing I was most excited about was just go out there in the morning and see the ducks and like during the sunrise. That was the thing I was most excited about. So I think for a lot of hunters, that's probably the case as well. It's just like being out in nature and getting to experience that. That was the most exciting thing for me.
So let's talk about that. We got up that morning. Kevin and Brett, you each went with a group of students to respective blinds. And then Patty and I were the only two in a smaller blind closer to the lodge. And I mean, it was like super convenient for us. I don't think I've ever arrived at a blind in a more convenient fashion where we got in one of the side-by-sides and we were taken right to it within 3 minutes of legal shooting hours. I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. It's not what I'm accustomed to. So we get in the blind, we sit there. It was very cloudy, so the sunrise that you were hoping for, Patty, really didn't materialize, unfortunately, at least from a picturesque standpoint. The sun did rise, although we couldn't see it. And so talk about what you remember from that experience as we got settled and the birds started moving, and I was enjoying your reaction, but I want you to kind of recount that for us.
I mean, yeah, like you said, we kind of got driven up to the blind, and we were really like, I had never been in a blind before, so I didn't know what to expect, but we were really just like in the marsh, like in a little box, basically a little rectangle that fit, maybe 3 or 4 people. And then, yeah, as the sun was kind of rising and the birds were starting to wake up, you hear birds singing, and then we just started seeing ducks flying everywhere. And I just remember being overwhelmed by the number of ducks that I was seeing and just so excited. Like, I don't even know what I was thinking. I was just excited to be seeing ducks. I wasn't even thinking about the hunt anymore at that point. But yeah, it was a beautiful experience. I feel really, really lucky to have been able to experience that.
And so as as your mentor on that hunt, there were a lot of thoughts rushing through my mind as well. You and I had talked, and there were sort of pre-hunt discussions and things of that nature. And I wanted to get a feel for how many times you had shot before, and you told me that y'all had several opportunities to shoot, and you were comfortable with the gun, and that was all as part of the program. And so that was kind of helpful piece of information. But this would have been your first time pulling the trigger on a live animal. And you and I and the rest of the group even kind of talked about the night before about what you thought your emotions might be, if you thought you would have some hesitation before pulling the trigger. And of course, out there in that setting, there's a lot going on. I mean, even for a seasoned hunter, that kind of morning where the sun's coming up, it's cloudy, species identification at legal shooting hours is nearly impossible. And given that we were seeing, there was a lot of teal that were buzzing through the decoys, they're moving quick and jumping left and right. And like, even for a seasoned hunter, that's a situation where you're like, that takes a high level of skill to execute those shots, cleanly. But yet here I am as sort of the mentor on this hunt, and I'm wanting you to have opportunities to shoot, but I'm also thinking it has to be the right situation. We need to make it enjoyable, and we're not going to be just shooting. So I think we just said, let's just stop. Let's just enjoy this. Let the birds fly around. We had several land in the decoys. I wanted to make sure that we were able to see the birds, get good shots on the birds. And that's going to be easier when you don't have 50 or 60 zipping around in all different directions, right?
Yeah, I remember you saying that, and I really appreciate the fact that you did, and that we were able to just kind of sit there and watch the birds. I remember hearing, I think it was either Brett's or Kevin's blind, like starting to shoot, and we were still kind of just sitting there enjoying the birds. And then I do remember you, like once it was time to start shooting, I think you could probably tell I was really hesitant to actually shoot the gun for the first time. And you said something like, would you like me to break the silence? And I was like, yes, please. Because I did have those thoughts before coming on the hunt, what if I get there and I just don't feel like I can do it? So I did have a lot of anxiety about that. So I appreciate that you kind of broke the silence there. And then once you had shot the first duck, and then I kind of got that all out of my system, and I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this now.
Yeah, well, I definitely could sense the anxiety even from the night before and that morning. And yeah, it can be an intimidating kind of environment if you've never been there before, especially when there's so many things happening so quickly, and when there's other people, other friends around that you already hear shooting. But no, it was, to me, and I think this is something that I think all mentors will appreciate and will try to do. It's about creating a situation where the new hunter is as comfortable as possible, is content in the situation, and the moment is right for them. And so I was glad that we were able to do that. I knew, based on the amount of bird activity that we were seeing early in the morning, that it wasn't going to be a problem if we waited, and that we would pretty soon start to get a few birds come in smaller groups. And sure enough, that's what happened. Kevin, you've done this for a number of years. Anything to add in terms of how you approach mentorship in the blind and the things that you look for and what you employ and have found that works well in these situations?
Well, a lot of it is preparation and making sure that the students are especially comfortable handling firearms. That's where a lot of the trepidation comes in. Even just which side of the shotgun shell faces forward when you put it in the gun, sort of thing. So some of it is preparation, but I think what I was reflecting on, and when Patty was telling her story, is unlike taking, your daughter or son hunting, where they've probably grown up with you as a mother or father who's been a hunter for their whole lives. And so they're sort of already part of that culture when they go on their first hunt. But our students in this program are decidedly non-hunters until they go on one of these hunts. And so they experience this just really rich tapestry of emotions when they're out there, that because it's all brand new to them. You know, if you take your daughter or son on a hunt, like, they've probably been in the blind with you before, and so they kind of know what to expect. But every experience, every single piece of this is brand new for the students. And just, as you said, watching their reactions to things that all hunters enjoy, you know, seeing birds in the morning, hearing whistling of wings, all of that, like, all of that is their first time, and it's amazing.
So, Patty, after that first shot, where I forget what I harvested first, but I went and retrieved it, came back, and then realized that it was we probably needed to switch sides of the blind, so we put you on the side where the birds tended to be coming from to kind of help you get a better, earlier view of them, better shot. I think it probably took you a few times before you finally connected on a bird, right? What do you remember about your success? I'm sure you've retold this story a number of times. What do you remember about your success those first 20 or so shots?
I remember being really bad at first and not hitting any ducks. And then I remember specifically, I think you were trying to, make me comfortable and letting me make the decision. I'm like, okay, this is a good group, like, when you're ready, if you're ready. And I think at one point I told you, I was just like, no, just tell me when to shoot the duck. I can't make this split decision on my own right now. So after you kind of started telling me, like, all right, this is the group, go for this duck, that kind of made it easier. And yeah, at first, I think it's just like the nerves of the fact that it happens so fast. You kind of just like stand up and try and get on the bird and shoot it. And I think for the first, I don't remember how long we were out there, but the first hour or two, maybe even at least, I was not very good. And then for some reason in the last 20 minutes, I think I just relaxed a lot, or had a lot less anxiety about the shooting aspect, and was more focused on hitting the bird and getting a clean shot. And for some reason, my skill level shot through the roof in the last 20 minutes of the hunt. I think I shot 3 ducks in 20 minutes.
Yeah, 3 ducks. I think 3 ducks in 3 shots, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I think there was. So the way I remember this progression of your shooting skill is that I think the first duck, there was one duck early in the morning where I could see that you hit it, and then I finished it off. That's one of the things that as a mentor I want to do, is make sure we don't have crippled ducks flying off. And so I finished that bird off, and then you shot and shot some more, and but then you connected on I think it was a hen ringneck, but it wasn't dead on the water, so I had to go retrieve it, and so brought that one back. And then I kind of get fuzzy here. I think the first one that you dropped cleanly by yourself was a hen shoveler, because that's actually the one that I have a video of. And when it hit the water, and I think you had to finish it off. Well, whenever you hit it, you and I were both so excited. We were you were turned to me and was kind of high five, and then we realized it was still alive, and so you had to finish it off on the water, and that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Having to finish it off. You went and retrieved it, kind of from shooting to harvesting, finishing it off, and then retrieving it, and that was pretty cool. It was a juvenile hen shoveler, young of the year, still had the notched tail feathers, and I think you even gave it a little thank you birdie as you walked back, kind of showing respect for that bird. And then from there, I think your next shots were the 3. There's another one in there somewhere, but then the other 3 were the ones where you dropped them cold. One was a Drake mallard. One was maybe another shoveler, and I forget what the other one was. But
I think it was 2 shovelers, maybe.
I think that's right. There was a teal was in there as well. But yeah, it was a phenomenal shooting display at the end. The worst part about it, Patty, is that the camera guy left before he went to another blind before you started connecting on the birds. And so, but that was a super treat for me. The other thing that was really special about that experience, about our time in the blind there, is that I think we had a Drake mallard come in, and you pulled up and you shot at it. I don't know. You might have had a pellet in it. I'm not sure. I'll give you credit for a pellet or two. But then it was finished off, and then I had to go retrieve it. And it was actually got kind of fortunate to find it and finish it off. And that turned out to be a banded Drake mallard.
Oh, yeah. That was so exciting.
Yeah. And it had been banded by Paul Dixon's brother across the river. I think it was in the spring. Yeah, it was earlier this spring when it had been banded. Came in by itself. And so then, of course, when we get back to camp, we take the band off, you call it in, you get the certificate. And so that was a pretty cool experience too, that doesn't happen very often, right?
Yeah, that was really exciting, especially on my first hunt. I imagine that's kind of a rare occurrence for that to happen. So that made it extra special.
So when you've told the story to other people, whether it be family or friends, what have been some of the highlights, the most memorable, the things that have made you most exciting? I'm sure they've asked you kind of what your emotions were. As you've had time to reflect on it, kind of what are the high points for you? Yeah,
I've most of my friends and family are non-hunters, so I've had some mixed reactions to telling the story. I'm pretty sure my mom's reaction was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you killed those poor ducks." Meanwhile, she's eating meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, but yeah, I think just honestly, the very beginning, like of being out there on the water and being there when the birds are waking up and just getting that experience of being able to watch and appreciate like the wonder that are ducks, and then I think those last like 20 minutes when I really felt most comfortable and I wasn't so anxious and worried about like everything that was going on, and I was kind of just focused on getting a clean shot, that was really, really rewarding for me. And I would like to say I really appreciate how hard you tried to make me feel comfortable with the actual act of like taking the life. It's an upsetting thing to do, and I had a lot of mixed emotions about it, especially seeing the ducks out there. I know you had to go out and finish a couple of ducks for me, so I really appreciate you like trying to make me comfortable through that whole experience, because it is really hard to deal with. Like you're trying to focus on, getting a clean shot and like doing everything right, but then there's also these like ducks next to you, and you haven't fully processed the fact that you just like killed those animals. So it's kind of a whirlwind of emotions. So I really appreciate you being there and helping me through that.
Oh, well, you're certainly welcome. It was my privilege to be part of that. And it's the level of thought that you just laid out there that made that experience so memorable for me, is that knowing that you had never hunted before, you were going into this with some anxiety, and you were thinking about this from a very respectful, very cerebral position, and that's really cool. It's also kind of really intimidating for to not knowing what's going through your mind, how you're going to react. But you and I got along well, and we had some kind of philosophical discussions there along the way, which added to the experience for me. And so, yeah, it's different depending on who it is that you're taking, whether they're a younger person and they're in the teens, or if they're a young adult, and then based on what the background and experiences of those people are. And, in your case, again, you were approaching it from a very thoughtful perspective and acknowledging that you're taking a life. We talked about that. The act of taking a life of an animal is a part of hunting, but you're doing it because that's going to become a source of protein, a source of food for you. So I had a ball. I had a blast. It's so mentally rewarding for me, emotionally rewarding for me. So I appreciate you allowing me to be part of that. The other thing that I'll ask, kind of transitioning from that, is I know you've had an opportunity to eat some of the ducks that you harvested. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so for Thanksgiving, we had a little Friendsgiving for all the grad students that stayed in Baton Rouge. And my lab mate, Garrett, and his wife, Aylett, are also hunters. And so they offered to cook some of the ducks for us. They made this, I don't know exactly what the recipe was. They prepared it, but it was like a mushroom stew type of thing. We cooked up, I think, one of the mallards and the ringneck duck, and I think one of the shovelers, and I thought it was delicious. I know some of the people were like, oh, you're going to eat a ringneck duck? And I was like, yeah, it tastes great. Like, I think it's amazing. I thought all the ducks tasted delicious. So that was really cool to be able to experience that. Like, I made this meal happen by going out and harvesting these animals, and everyone's here sitting around this meal and really enjoying it. So that was a really cool feeling for me.
Yeah, it really is. And hey, there's nothing wrong with eating a ringneck duck. Some of the best ducks that I have ever eaten were ringnecks. Obviously, it's going to depend a little bit on where they are and what they're eating at that particular place. But, ringnecks can be some of the absolute best eating that you can get out there. I see Kevin nodding his head. That tells me he's eaten a few ringneck ducks.
Yeah, hard to get the skin off, but they taste just fine.
Yeah. Patty, did you have an opportunity to try the different ducks and compare them? Were you curious about that?
Yeah, I think that the only thing that I noticed, I mean, I don't have, a very refined palate when it comes to eating ducks, so I don't know. But I thought that the ringneck, I could taste a little bit of a difference between like the ringneck and the mallard especially, but it wasn't anything extreme. If anything, I thought it tasted like a little bit gamier. I don't know if that's the right word, but I thought they were both equally delicious.
Yeah, very cool. The other thing that I know you and I talked about, you shared during the hunt and maybe afterwards is your kind of greater appreciation or kind of firsthand observation of the care and the role that folks like Paul Dixon, waterfowl hunters contribute to conservation in many ways. We've talked, I'm sure Kevin's talked to y'all about this, through license sales, duck stamps, contributions to nonprofit organizations, et cetera, et cetera. Then there are hunters that own or manage property to provide that high quality habitat. And you certainly saw that at Paul Dixon's place. Did you realize how good it could be in some of those locations? Did your perspective on that, and they're not all like that, let's be clear. But any kind of additional perspective or reinforced perspective on the importance of that type of private land management as a key tool in conservation?
Yeah, I mean, having done my undergrad at UF, like I said, they definitely have a big hunting community there. So it's something that I've kind of experienced like on the side. I've always appreciated, what hunters do for conservation. So I've always had that in the back of my mind. But it was cool to experience it firsthand and to see, like Paul Dixon's property was incredible. And I really, really appreciate, you can tell that he just like puts his heart and soul into managing that property, and especially the stuff that they do with the aviary. So you can tell that he's just all about the ducks. And so it was really cool to meet him and see all the love and care that he puts into that. And then also just kind of extend that to the wider hunting community. And I know that there are hundreds of people, probably more across the United States, that are putting their heart and soul into conserving these wetlands as well. So even from an outside perspective, just as being a birder, I can really appreciate what they're doing. And I know that I'm reaping the benefits of all the hard work that they're putting into it and all the money that the hunters are putting into wetland conservation every time that I go out and I go look at some ducks with my binoculars.
Patty, the final question for you is, are you making plans to go on additional hunts?
So I would love to go on another hunt. Right now, I'm actually prepping to go into the field. So I'll be leaving in January, and I'll be gone for all of January and February. But when I come back, I will most definitely be bothering Kevin and Brett to take me out again.
Or if there's anybody in South Louisiana listening to this podcast episode that wants to take Patty and any of her friend out hunting, let us know.
Please.
We'll see what we can do. Patty, it was an absolute treat for me to be able to join you in the blind there and be part of your experience. I appreciate that. And thanks for joining us here on this episode.
Of course. Thank you so much, not only for the duck hunting experience, but for having me on this podcast. It was really a life-changing thing that I did, so I'm glad.
I love to hear that. Kevin, final thoughts from you. Kind of, you've done this for a number of years. Like, what do you find? What's the most rewarding part? Obviously, listening to the story of Patty is going to be up there in those, and other students. I also want to make clear there were other students involved in the hunt there at Panola. They have their own fascinating, rewarding experiences that are featured in the video. But just kind of overall, what's the most rewarding and fun part of this entire thing?
I mean, I think you just heard it, Mike. It's generating 30 stories just like Patty's every year, and they're all unique, right? Everyone comes at it from a different background, from a different perspective, and it's just when a student pulls the trigger and reduces that public trust resource to private possession, and they sort of participate, in the food chain in a really visceral way. Like it's transformational for them, for a lot of them, and you can see it. Like if you watch this DU Nation episode, and I bring this gorgeous Drake Mallard back to Emma, who is in my blind, that was her first duck. I mean, she is a different person before that bird was shot and after that bird is shot. And so, that's the most rewarding part for me by far. I mean, it's not like I'm getting paid more to take these students on these hunts, right? This is extra on our part to provide these opportunities and give up our weekends and things like that. So it's experiences like that make it truly worthwhile. Patty said she wants to hunt again, and I would say most of our students do. I'd say they probably fall into the three categories you would expect. There's maybe 5 or 10% who are like, I really didn't care for that, and I don't think I'm going to do it again, which is fine. And then there's sort of probably 40%, 30% who appreciate the experience, enjoyed the morning, but really like their career path is going somewhere else, and they're just not. They don't have it. It didn't spark anything in them strong enough to like really get after it and pursue it. But then I would say half or more are really excited that this is going to be their new thing. So I think we had 4 of the 8 students on the trip like want to get their first bird mounted, which is a little bit crazy because these are broke undergrads and they're going to pay $300 or $400 to have this bird mounted, because their first trophy bird was a juvie hen shoveler, and that's going to be what they remember. I mean, I don't know if you remember your first duck, but I certainly do, right? A green-winged teal on Fossil Creek in Colorado with my mom and dad. So it really changes them. And, one of the most common conversation topics in the vans on the way home from these hunts is students wanting to know what an entry-level shotgun costs. That's what they want to know because they're on their phones, like looking up what sort of guns they can afford, and so they're add Mossberg 500A or whatever it is to their Christmas list, because I point out that they're probably going to be shooting not quite as nice firearms as we have for these student hunts. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's the other thing that we've discussed on a previous episode. There's a lot more that goes into taking a person from first hunt to independent hunter, and there's a role for mentorship in that area as well. And so, Kevin and Brett and all your friends and colleagues there are have the potential to play important roles in that as well. So, this was a really neat thing for me to be part of. Kevin, if you ever need help again, and if I'm around, let me know. I'm happy to do it. I do know that I need to give you an opportunity to acknowledge all the partners that helped make this happen. So why don't you go ahead and do that? You certainly don't do it alone. It takes a lot of people to pull this off.
Yeah, certainly. So, we've been fortunate to have the support of the LSU administration on this because, we run it through LSU. And so we use, their vans and things like that. And, they're supportive and they even publicize it. So it's a feather in their cap. And so, I got to thank the people who employ me first and foremost. We've had longtime support from Nomad Outdoors. They provide some camouflage for the students. I mean, you think about just the financial logistics of trying to equip 30 students with camouflage because they don't have it. And so they've been a big supporter, for over the years in facilitating a lot of that. Jay Pinsky at the Hunting Wire sort of facilitated a new connection with Benelli this season. And so Benelli has donated a bunch of, maybe not donated, loaned us a bunch of top-of-the-line firearms for our hunts. And so, if you want to make, clean kills and have a good experience, like having top quality gear makes it a lot easier. And then, Delta Waterfowl has historically provided us with some of the ammunition that we use. As you saw, Mike, we can go through some boxes of shells with first-time hunters. So certainly a non-trivial expense. For a long time, me and Brett were just paying for it sort of out of pocket from the little bit of slush money that we get from our grants and things like that. But having that support is really useful. It's just and DU was out there with the film crew and donated some jackets for the kids, which was great. So this is a great opportunity for private individuals to get involved in sponsoring some of these hunts, becoming participatory in the training of the next generation of waterfowl scientists. If you're concerned about the future of wetlands and waterfowl management, this is a great way to get involved, is to offer one of these student hunts, right? And similarly for corporate sponsors and things like that, having a bunch of hyper enthusiastic college students wearing your gear or whatever doesn't look bad. So we're always looking for additional partners and things like that, but we're certainly appreciative of the support that we've received so far.
Kevin, Patty, thank you all so much for joining us here today. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be part of that special experience. It was great to connect with y'all. Thanks for joining us, and hope y'all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mike. Great to talk to you.
A special thanks to our guest on today's episode, Dr. Kevin Ringelman and Patty Rodrigues, both from LSU. We appreciate their time here on this episode. A super exciting story to tell. As always, we thank our producer, Chris Isaac, for the great work he does on these episodes and getting them out to you. And to you, the listener, we thank you for your time and for your support of wetlands and waterfowl conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit www.ducks.org/DU podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the ducks. Stay tuned to the ducks.